Pontius Pilate, Roman governor of Judea, found himself in an extremely delicate position. He governed an unstable province where the relationship between the Jewish people and the Roman Empire was marked by distrust and hostility. His letter, whether real or legendary, addressed to Emperor Tiberius, provides insight into the challenges he faced. Upon succeeding Valerius Gratus, Pilate took command of a region where political and religious instability could erupt at any moment. The letter, which mentions the crucifixion of Jesus, suggests a constant concern about revolts, especially in Jerusalem, the center of religious tension. Pilate states that the lack of soldiers was a permanent difficulty, making the control of the city even more fragile. Jerusalem, particularly during the Jewish Passover, was a powder keg, with crowds of pilgrims increasing the potential for unrest. With few soldiers, Pilate had to balance the demands of Jewish leaders with the interests of Rome. His political survival depended on maintaining peace in the province, without irritating Emperor Tiberius, who was known for being impatient with governors who failed to keep order. It was in this context that Jesus of Nazareth emerged as a figure who caught Pilate's attention. Initially, he had heard of a young man preaching in Galilee, but contrary to his concerns, Jesus did not seem to be a rebel against the Roman Empire. In fact, Jesus was described by Pilate as someone who spoke calmly and did not encourage violence against Rome. This image is quite different from that of the Jewish religious leaders of the time, who often opposed Roman rule. Another point of interest is Pilate's physical description of Jesus. He mentioned that Jesus had golden hair and an almost celestial appearance, contrasting with his listeners, whom Pilate described as having darker skin and beards. This description does not appear in the Gospels and is a unique detail that raises questions about its historical accuracy or the possible symbolism of the letter. If Pilate did indeed describe Jesus in this way, it's possible that he was struck not only by Jesus' words but also by his appearance. Despite his apparent admiration for Jesus, Pilate found himself in a complicated position. The Jewish religious elite, represented by the temple priests, demanded that Jesus be condemned to death. Accused of blasphemy and proclaiming himself King of the Jews, Jesus represented a threat to the existing order, at least in the eyes of the religious leaders. For Pilate, the accusation itself was not as worrying as the possibility of a popular revolt. He was caught between public pressure and the risk of losing his political status. Pilate hesitated before condemning Jesus. In the Gospels, he appears as someone who did not want to be held responsible for the death of a man he considered innocent. His famous hand-washing symbolizes his desire to absolve himself of guilt for the crucifixion. However, political and social pressure made him give in. The crowd demanded crucifixion, and the religious leaders took advantage of the situation to provoke conflict with Pilate, putting him in a position where refusing their demands could lead to a rebellion that he lacked the resources to contain. Pilate attempted to resolve the dilemma by offering the crowd the choice of freeing Jesus or Barabbas, a notorious criminal. To his surprise, the people chose to release Barabbas, making it clear that Pilate no longer had control of the situation. Even though he didn't see Jesus as a direct threat, Pilate gave in to popular will, authorizing the crucifixion to maintain order. Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee, also played a role in this episode. Pilate sent Jesus to Herod, who was in Jerusalem at the time, hoping that he could resolve the impasse. However, Herod returned Jesus to Pilate, signaling that, though curious about the miracles attributed to Jesus, he did not consider him a significant threat. This gesture showed that, despite a division of power between the Romans and Jewish authorities, Pilate could not avoid responsibility for Jesus' fate. After the crucifixion, the event that would change the course of history occurred: the resurrection of Jesus. According to Christian tradition, Jesus rose on the third day, and this news quickly spread, inevitably reaching Pilate's ears. If he indeed wrote a letter to Tiberius recounting these events, he would have had to confront something that challenged his understanding and Roman beliefs. The resurrection was not only a religious miracle, but also an event that shook the political and spiritual foundations of Rome. Jesus' impact was so profound that, according to Tertullian, Tiberius considered including Jesus in the Roman pantheon of gods. This indicates that even in the highest imperial circles, the stories about Jesus, his crucifixion and resurrection were taken seriously. If true, Tiberius's attempt to deify him represents a recognition that Jesus was more than just an ordinary Jewish prophet. Pilate, having witnessed supernatural phenomena like the earthquake and darkness during the crucifixion, may have begun to fear that he was dealing with something beyond his control. Fear of the supernatural was not uncommon among the Romans, who had great respect for gods and omens. These events certainly left Pilate with doubts about his decision. In the years that followed, Pilate's account became a fundamental piece of Christian apologetics. Justin Martyr and Tertullian mentioned Pilate's letter as proof that even a Roman official recognized Jesus' uniqueness. This was used to legitimize Christianity in the eyes of the Romans, who still viewed the new faith with suspicion. The mention of the division of Jesus' garments, for example, connects biblical accounts to Pilate's supposed letter. However, the influence of Pilate's letter was not limited to Christians. The pagan emperor Maximinus Daia, in an attempt to discredit Christianity, commissioned a false version of the Acts of Pilate, showing how the original document had relevance even among Christianity's enemies. The creation of a false account reveals the impact that Pilate's figure and his testimony about Jesus had on the Roman world. Throughout history, Pontius Pilate has been viewed through various lenses. For some, he is a tragic figure, caught between politics and morality. For others, he is the villain who, despite recognizing Jesus' innocence, chose political convenience over justice. His letter to Tiberius, whether genuine or not, offers a unique perspective on how a Roman official might have interpreted the events surrounding Jesus. If Pilate foresaw that the events in Judea could alter Rome's destiny, he was right. Christianity, born in the streets of Jerusalem and solidified by the crucifixion of Jesus, would soon spread throughout the Roman Empire, forever changing its history. The supposed letter from Pilate to Tiberius is, therefore, more than just a historical document. It is a key point in understanding how the Romans dealt with the rise of Christianity and the enigmatic figure of Jesus. For Pilate, Jesus may have been just another man accused of insurrection, but to the world, he would become the center of a faith that would transform the empire Pilate served. Pilate's relevance transcended his administrative role in Jerusalem. Although to the Roman Empire he was merely another governor of a turbulent province, his involvement in the events of Christ's Passion turned him into a central figure in the Christian narrative. The letter he supposedly sent to Tiberius exemplifies this transcendence, illustrating how his view of the events contributed to the later narrative about Jesus and the beginnings of Christianity. In addition to the possible description of Jesus and the supernatural events surrounding his crucifixion, Pilate's account opens a window into the complexity of political relations between Rome and the occupied territories. Judea, in particular, was a province where religious tensions often turned into revolts. Pilate himself, at other points in his career, faced direct challenges when he tried to introduce pagan symbols into Jerusalem, provoking massive protests from the Jewish population. This context explains part of his hesitation in dealing with Jesus. He was aware that any miscalculated decision could trigger a revolt, endangering his position and perhaps even his life. Herod Antipas, another protagonist in this story, shares part of this tension. Ruling Galilee under Roman authority, Herod also felt threatened by Jesus' activities. Although the Gospels tell us that Herod was eager to see Jesus perform miracles, his return of Jesus to Pilate demonstrates that Herod did not want to take responsibility for his fate. This power play between Herod and Pilate reflects the complexities of local politics in Roman Palestine, where Jewish and Roman authorities maintained an ambiguous relationship of cooperation and conflict. Another fundamental aspect of this story is the impact of Jesus' resurrection. Pilate, as a Roman governor, was a pragmatic man, and reports of a resurrection would likely have been met with skepticism. However, the spread of Christianity and the early Christians' insistence that Jesus had risen certainly forced him to recognize that he was dealing with something beyond a simple execution. If he did report these events to Tiberius, he would have mentioned the profound impact that the resurrection claims had on the population. This supernatural event, for which he apparently had no rational explanation, would have added to his frustration and possible regret. The figure of Tiberius also plays an important role in this narrative. The emperor was known for his cruelty and paranoia, ruling Rome with an iron fist. It is intriguing that, according to some Christian sources, Tiberius was so impressed by the reports about Jesus that he considered including him in the Roman pantheon. Although this story is viewed with skepticism by many historians, it reflects how Christianity, even in its early days, was beginning to leave a mark on the Roman Empire. The belief that Tiberius might have recognized Jesus' divinity suggests that the impact of Christianity was already being felt in the highest circles of power. Maximinus Daia's decision, centuries later, to create a falsified version of the Acts of Pilate to discredit Christianity, is evidence of the weight the original document held. The fact that the emperor felt the need to forge a document contradicting the Christian narrative indicates that even among pagans, the events described by Pilate were seen as significant. This also shows how, by the 4th century, Christianity had become a powerful force in the Roman Empire, strong enough for emperors like Maximinus to consider it a threat to the established order. Finally, Pilate's image throughout history varies depending on perspective. For some, he is an example of a pragmatic leader making a difficult decision under extreme pressure. For others, he is the symbol of a man who yielded to injustice for political convenience. His attempt to wash his hands, a gesture that has echoed for centuries in Christian culture, reflects a conscience tormented by his role in the execution of a man he considered innocent. The letter to Tiberius can thus be seen as part of his attempt to justify his actions, whether to himself, the emperor, or posterity. The crucifixion of Jesus, therefore, was not merely an isolated event in a remote province of the Roman Empire. It became the catalyst for the greatest spiritual and cultural transformation the ancient world had ever seen. Pilate's letter to Tiberius, whether authentic or not, symbolizes the intersection of politics and spirituality, of Roman power and the emerging Christian faith. Pilate, Herod, Tiberius, and the other characters in this story may have played their roles without fully realizing the impact of their actions. However, the decisions they made, driven by fear, ambition, and survival, helped shape the course of human history. Jesus' resurrection, as the final act of this drama, ensured that Pilate's name would forever be etched into Christian memory. Pilate's letter, referenced by figures like Justin Martyr and Tertullian, served to lend legitimacy to the Christian narrative in the eyes of Roman power. And as Christianity grew, this legitimacy helped lay the groundwork for the eventual conversion of the Roman Empire to the new faith. Ironically, the man who tried to wash his hands of responsibility for Jesus' death ended up playing a crucial role in spreading Christ's message, albeit unintentionally. Thus, Pontius Pilate, a Roman governor simply trying to maintain peace in a difficult province, became a figure of great significance in the history of humanity. His letter, his actions, and even his hesitation reflect the complexity of a moment that changed the world's destiny. What began as a political decision to maintain order in Jerusalem ultimately led to the foundation of a faith that would transform the Roman Empire and, eventually, the world. However, Pilate's relevance goes beyond his political actions. His figure has come to symbolize the confrontation between temporal and spiritual power. The tension between the Roman governor and Jesus Christ illustrates how the kingdom of God, proclaimed by Jesus, directly contrasted with earthly kingdoms like the Roman Empire. While Pilate represented the highest authority in the political and military realm, Jesus brought a moral and spiritual authority that transcended the power structures of the time. This dichotomy lies at the heart of Christ's trial and crucifixion, and perhaps Pilate vaguely perceived the significance of this tension. The gesture of washing his hands, so emblematic in the Gospels, carries deep symbolism. It not only signals Pilate's attempt to absolve himself of the guilt of condemning a man he knew to be innocent, but also reflects the impotence of earthly power in the face of a greater spiritual force. Pilate, with all the military and political power he possessed, could not prevent the popular will and the pressure of religious leaders from prevailing. This act of washing his hands was a public confession that despite his position, he had no control over Jesus' fate, and perhaps not even over his own. Over the centuries, Pilate's figure has been reinterpreted by various religious and cultural groups. For example, in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Pilate is seen as a saint, someone who ultimately recognized Jesus' divinity and was therefore forgiven. This view contrasts sharply with the traditional Western view, where Pilate is remembered as the ruler who condemned Jesus to death. These different perspectives show how history and biblical events are reevaluated according to the cultural context and spiritual needs of each society. In the Roman Empire, Christianity continued to grow, and accounts like the supposed letter from Pilate to Tiberius helped lend legitimacy to the new faith. Christianity needed a way to engage with Roman power, and Pilate's narrative, a Roman governor who witnessed the events and reported to the emperor, gave credibility to the emerging religion. This was crucial at a time when Christians were still viewed with suspicion and persecuted in various parts of the empire. Over time, the figure of Tiberius also became indirectly linked to the spread of Christianity. Although there is no concrete evidence that Tiberius ever considered Jesus as a divine figure, as Tertullian and others claimed, the fact that these stories circulated suggests that the impact of Jesus was already spreading far beyond the borders of Judea. Christianity, a faith that began on the periphery of the Roman Empire, was now starting to penetrate the highest spheres of power. The fact that Maximinus Daia created a falsified version of the Acts of Pilate to discredit Christianity is also a testament to the impact the original account had. Christianity, once seen as a minor and potentially disruptive sect, was now becoming a significant threat to Roman paganism. The decision to forge documents that could contradict Christian accounts demonstrates how much Roman authorities feared the growing influence of this new religion. Even if the authenticity of Pilate's letter to Tiberius is contested, the mere fact that it was used by Christian leaders and attacked by pagans shows that its existence, real or mythical, was an important convergence point in the early Christian narrative. This use of documents to validate or discredit a faith is a recurring theme in religious history. In Pilate's case, his real or fictitious letter was not only a personal defense, but also an instrument of legitimacy for Christians. By mentioning Jesus in an official Roman context, Pilate would have helped solidify Christ's presence in the historical narrative of the Roman Empire. Later, with Constantine's conversion and the official adoption of Christianity by the empire, these accounts became even more significant, as they connected the events of Jesus' life to figures of Roman authority. Additionally, Tiberius's alleged attempt to add Jesus to the Roman pantheon, if true, is a fascinating example of how the Roman Empire was capable of absorbing and incorporating new deities. Throughout history, Rome had assimilated various religions and cults from conquered territories, and the inclusion of Jesus among the Roman gods could have been a strategic move to calm the religious tensions that were beginning to emerge with Christianity's growth. However, the Christians' resistance to any kind of syncretism with Rome's official religion eventually made this proposal unviable. To Christ's followers, he was not just one among many gods, but the only true God, a belief that ultimately revolutionized the very concept of religion in the ancient world. On the other hand, Christianity found a way to engage with Roman power in a unique manner. By adopting Pilate's figure as a witness to the life and death of Jesus, early Christians showed remarkable skill in dialoguing with the prevailing power system. Pilate, a symbol of imperial authority, became a bridge between the empire and the new faith. This process culminated with Constantine's conversion, but it had already been underway in earlier centuries, as the Christian message resonated both with the oppressed and the powerful. Pontius Pilate's figure, therefore, remains one of the most intriguing and complex in the Christian narrative. His role in Jesus' trial and condemnation, his possible letter to Tiberius, and the way he has been reinterpreted over the centuries reveal the multiple layers of meaning his figure carries. He is at once the pragmatic ruler who made difficult decisions under great pressure, the man who yielded to injustice for political convenience, and the symbol of a figure tormented by a fate he knew to be unjust. Ultimately, Pilate is a deeply human figure, someone who, like all of us, faced difficult choices and unforeseen consequences. His letter to Tiberius, real or not, reflects this humanity, his political concerns, his fear of repercussions, and his possible attempt to justify his actions. And it is precisely this humanity that makes his story so powerful and relevant even today. Even amidst imperial power, Pilate could not prevent the story of Jesus from continuing to be told, a story that transcended the boundaries of his province and spread throughout the world. Thus, Pontius Pilate, the man who tried to wash his hands of responsibility, became a crucial witness to the events that changed the course of history. Even without fully understanding what was happening, he played a key role in a narrative that would shape the future of Western civilization and the spirituality of millions. Beyond the political and religious dilemmas surrounding Pilate's figure, his decision to condemn Jesus had repercussions that went beyond his own understanding. Pilate, a man accustomed to dealing with insurgencies and maintaining fragile peace in a difficult province, may not have realized that his decision at that moment would become part of a narrative shaping history for millennia. The impact of his decision resonated not only in Rome's political sphere, but also in the rise of a new spirituality that would challenge the social and religious structures of the time. The tragic irony is that, by trying to avoid an immediate conflict with Jewish authorities and the population, Pilate inadvertently became involved in the birth of a movement that would destabilize the very Roman Empire he served so zealously. As Christianity grew and expanded, Pilate became a paradoxical symbol, at once remembered as the executor who authorized Jesus' death, but also as someone who recognized Christ's innocence, though he could not prevent his condemnation. His famous phrase, "Exe homo," behold the man, echoes throughout history as a moment of acknowledgement of Jesus' uniqueness. Over time, early Christians used Pilate's figure to reinforce the legitimacy of their faith, turning an episode of brutality and injustice into a cornerstone of the Christian narrative. Pilate, perhaps unintentionally, helped solidify Christianity as a transformative force, leaving an indelible mark on Western history and the fate of the Roman Empire.